Have you ever had a thought you wanted to say, but somehow the moment passed? Maybe you had an idea in a meeting, a dream you never shared, or a feeling you couldn't quite explain. It happens more often than people admit. Millions of thoughts pass through our minds every day, yet most of them disappear before they ever take shape. Now here's the strange part. Some of the most life-changing ideas you will ever have might already be sitting quietly inside your mind right now. Not because you lack intelligence, not because you lack potential, but because those thoughts never found a way out. This is the story of a man who lived that way for years, a man with a head full of ideas and a life that seemed stuck in place, until he discovered something almost ridiculously simple, a daily habit that slowly untangled his thoughts and rebuilt his future. What makes this story powerful isn't that he was extraordinary, it's that he started with something anyone can do tonight. No special talent, no audience, no complicated system, just a blank page and the courage to begin writing. And by the end of this story, you might realize something surprising. The thoughts that could reshape your future might already be inside your mind. They may just be waiting for a place to land. Most people move through life carrying entire worlds inside their minds. Thoughts half-formed, dreams barely whispered, feelings that never quite find the right moment to be spoken aloud. Day after day, these invisible words pile up quietly in the corners of their thoughts. On the outside, life looks ordinary. Conversations happen, routines continue. But inside, something important remains locked behind a silent door. You've probably seen it before. Someone sits in a room full of people, nodding along, listening carefully. They have opinions, ideas, maybe even brilliant insights. Yet when the moment to speak arrives, the words hesitate at the edge of their lips. And somehow, the moment passes before they ever come out. At first, it doesn't seem like a big problem. After all, not everyone enjoys talking all the time. But silence, when it becomes a habit, starts to carry weight. Ideas remain unfinished. Dreams remain untested. And little by little, a quiet frustration begins to grow. Inside the mind, it feels like standing in a crowded room of thoughts. Ideas bump into each other. Emotions swirl. Questions linger without answers. Some thoughts are hopeful. Others are heavy with doubt. But without an outlet, they simply circle the mind over and over again, like birds trapped inside a closed house, searching for a window. Over time, something subtle begins to happen. Those unspoken ideas start losing their sharpness. Dreams that once felt exciting begin to feel distant, not because they were impossible, but because they were never fully explored. Many people assume clarity comes from thinking harder. But the truth is, the mind isn't always built for storing endless thoughts. Without expression, thinking becomes like trying to untangle a knot in the dark. You pull one thread, then another, but everything remains tangled, and the frustration quietly deepens. Some people try to talk it out with friends. Others scroll endlessly through distractions, hoping the noise will quiet their minds. But the thoughts are still there, waiting patiently in the background. Unfinished ideas, unanswered questions, dreams that never found their voice. And somewhere in the world, there was a man who knew this struggle better than most. A man whose mind was filled with thoughts no one had ever heard. A man who lived surrounded by silence, not because he had nothing to say, but because he never found a way to release the storm inside his mind. And that silent storm would eventually lead to a life-changing story. The man at the center of this story wasn't loud, bold, or particularly noticeable. In fact, most people would have described him with a single word: quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that fills a room with calm. No, his silence was different, heavier somehow, like a story waiting to be told but never quite beginning. He worked ordinary days, surrounded by people who spoke easily and confidently. Conversations flowed around him like a fast-moving river. Jokes were shared, opinions exchanged, plans discussed, and there he was, standing nearby, listening carefully to every word. Yet somehow, his own thoughts never seemed to find their way into the current. Inside his mind, though, it was a completely different world. Ideas sparked constantly, creative solutions, deep reflections, bold dreams. Sometimes he'd rehearse what he wanted to say before a conversation even started. He'd imagine the moment, the words, the reactions. But when the real moment arrived, the words quietly dissolved. At first, people simply assumed he preferred silence. Just a quiet guy, they'd say with a shrug. No one meant anything cruel by it. But labels have a strange way of settling into a person's identity, and over time, he began to believe that description himself. Meetings would end before he'd spoken a single sentence. Group discussions would wrap up while his ideas remained unshared. Even casual conversations at lunch felt like crowded stages he couldn't step onto. It wasn't that he lacked intelligence or imagination. If anything, his mind was overflowing with both. Sometimes he'd walk home replaying entire conversations in his head. You know the kind. Those moments where suddenly the perfect words appear, but hours too late. He'd think, that's exactly what I should have said, and the realization would sting more than he liked to admit. Still, he wasn't lazy or indifferent about his life. Deep down, he wanted something more meaningful. He dreamed about building something valuable, sharing ideas that mattered. But dreams trapped inside a silent mind rarely become visible in the world. And day by day, he began to feel like a spectator in his own life. What no one around him realized was that the quiet man carried an entire universe of thoughts inside his head. And if those thoughts had ever found a way out, they might have changed everything about his future. But for now, they remained locked away, waiting. And that silence was beginning to shape the way he saw himself. At first, the silence around him felt harmless. After all, plenty of people lived quiet lives and seemed perfectly fine. But inside his mind, something far more complicated was happening. Thoughts piled on top of thoughts, like papers scattered across a desk no one ever organized. And slowly, the clutter began to weigh on him. His mind was rarely still. Ideas arrived at random moments. During long walks, late at night, even in the middle of ordinary conversations. Sometimes he imagined business ideas, other times solutions to problems he saw around him. But those ideas had nowhere to go. They simply circled endlessly in his head. Imagine carrying dozens of unfinished conversations inside your mind. Questions you never asked, dreams you never explained, opinions you never voiced. That was the invisible storm he lived with every day. Over time, the storm started changing the way he saw himself. Not all at once. No, it happened quietly, almost unnoticed. A missed opportunity here, a silent moment there. Little by little, a dangerous thought began to appear. Maybe my ideas aren't worth saying. That thought crept in during meetings. It whispered during conversations. It showed up when someone else said something similar to the idea he had been holding back. And each time it happened, the doubt grew stronger, like a shadow stretching longer at sunset. Soon he began holding his thoughts back even earlier. Before he even considered speaking, his mind would stop him. What if it sounds stupid? What if nobody cares? So he stayed quiet, and the silence deepened. But here's the strange thing about unspoken thoughts. They don't disappear. They linger, echoing quietly in the background of your mind. And if they stay there long enough, they start turning into something heavier. Something that feels a lot like isolation. He could be surrounded by people and still feel strangely alone. Not because no one was there, but because the real version of him never fully entered the room. His ideas, his questions, his reflections, they all stayed locked inside. And the longer this continued, the more it felt like his life had stopped moving forward. Not dramatically, not with a visible collapse. Just a slow, quiet feeling of being stuck in place, like standing at the edge of a road, watching everyone else walk past. But eventually, life has a way of forcing a person to confront what they've been avoiding. For a long time, his silence simply blended into the background of his life. Days passed, conversations came and went, opportunities quietly slipped by. Nothing dramatic happened, no sudden disaster, no loud confrontation. Just the slow accumulation of moments where he stayed quiet when he wished he hadn't. And eventually, those moments began to pile up. Then one day, something small happened, but it hit him harder than expected. During a meeting, someone shared an idea that sounded strangely familiar. As he listened, a quiet shock ran through him. It was almost identical to a thought he had carried in his mind for months, a thought he had never spoken. The room filled with excitement. People nodded, praised the idea, discussed how powerful it could become. Plans started forming almost immediately, and there he sat, frozen in his chair. Because deep down, he knew something painful. He had thought about that very idea many times before, on quiet evenings, during long walks home, even late at night when sleep refused to come. But the idea had lived only inside his mind. That moment stayed with him long after the meeting ended. The voices faded, the room emptied, but the realization remained. His silence wasn't protecting him the way he once believed. In fact, It was slowly stealing possibilities from his life, possibilities he had never even tried to claim. As he walked home that evening, his thoughts felt louder than usual. Every unspoken idea seemed to echo at once. Dreams he had postponed, questions he had buried, words he had swallowed 100 times before, and suddenly, something became impossible to ignore. The problem wasn't that he lacked ideas. The problem wasn't that he lacked intelligence. The real problem was far simpler. His thoughts never left his mind. That night, sitting alone in the quiet of his room, he faced a difficult truth. If he continued living this way, nothing would change. Years could pass, and his life might still look exactly the same, because a mind full of ideas means very little if those ideas never find a way into the world. And that realization forced him to ask a question he had avoided for years. That night, the silence in his room felt different, not peaceful, not comforting, almost confrontational. It was as if every thought he had ever ignored was suddenly asking the same question. How much longer are you going to keep everything locked inside your head? And for once, he didn't push the question away. He sat at his small desk, staring at the blank space in front of him. No meeting room, no crowd, no pressure to speak perfectly, just a quiet moment and the weight of his own thoughts. For the first time in a long while, he considered a simple possibility. Maybe expression didn't have to begin with speaking. Then a strange idea crossed his mind. What if he didn't need an audience at all? What if the first step was simply releasing the thought somewhere safe? No judgment, no interruptions, no fear of sounding foolish. Just words leaving his mind and landing somewhere real. So he reached for something incredibly ordinary, a simple notebook that had been sitting unused for months. Its pages were blank, patient, almost inviting. He picked up a pen, hesitated for a moment, and then wrote his first sentence. It wasn't brilliant. It wasn't poetic. Honestly, it was barely structured at all. Just a messy collection of thoughts about his day, his frustrations, his ideas. But the moment the ink touched the paper, something shifted. For the first time in years, his thoughts had somewhere to go. They didn't need to stay trapped in his mind anymore. They could stretch out across the page, imperfect and unfinished. And strangely enough, that simple act felt like opening a window. Fresh air entered a room that had been closed for far too long. He kept writing longer than he expected. A few minutes turned into nearly an hour. Some sentences made sense, others wandered aimlessly. But none of that mattered, because something important had just begun. When he finally closed the notebook, he noticed something surprising. His mind felt lighter, clearer somehow. The storm inside his head hadn't disappeared, but it had changed. Instead of chaos, there was the beginning of order. And that tiny change sparked a quiet curiosity. If writing once could create this much relief, what might happen if he did it again tomorrow? Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, I created an ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours and More Too bonus for you. It's for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and live with more lightness. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. The next morning, the notebook was still there on his desk, closed, quiet, almost ordinary again. But now it carried a strange kind of gravity, because he knew something about it that no one else did. Inside those pages, his thoughts had finally started breathing. At first, he assumed the feeling from the night before was just temporary relief. You know how it goes. Sometimes putting emotions somewhere feels good in the moment, but that doesn't always mean it changes anything long-term. Still, curiosity nudged him forward. So later that evening, he opened the notebook again. He began writing about the simplest things, what frustrated him during the day, ideas that crossed his mind while walking home, questions about his future that he never dared to ask out loud. And little by little, something surprising began to happen. The more he wrote, the more his thoughts seemed to organize themselves. Problems that once felt overwhelming became easier to examine. Dreams that once felt vague started forming clearer shapes. It was almost like stepping outside his own mind and seeing it from a distance. And that perspective changed everything. Around that time, he stumbled across a simple idea. It came through a book he found one quiet evening, though it could have come from anywhere. A mentor, a teacher, even a passing conversation. The idea was almost embarrassingly simple. Writing isn't just a way to record thoughts, it's a way to discover them. The author explained something powerful. Most people assume thinking happens entirely inside the mind. But when thoughts move onto paper, something deeper occurs. You begin noticing patterns, contradictions, hidden fears, and suddenly, your mind starts revealing truths it was hiding from itself. That realization struck him harder than expected. All those years, he believed his problem was communication. He thought he struggled because he wasn't good at speaking up. But maybe the real issue was something else entirely. Maybe he had never fully understood his own thoughts. Writing wasn't just expression, it was exploration. A quiet conversation between the present version of himself and the future one he hoped to become. And if that was true, then those blank pages weren't ordinary at all. They were tools. And once he realized that, the way he approached writing began to change. Once he understood that writing wasn't just a place to unload thoughts, but a way to discover them, something shifted in his approach. The notebook stopped being a random escape and started feeling like a quiet workshop for his mind. Instead of waiting for inspiration, he made a simple decision. He would sit down every day and write, whether he felt like it or not. Not perfectly, just consistently. At first, he kept the rules incredibly simple. 3 pages a day, no matter what was on his mind. Some days he wrote about problems at work. Other days he scribbled half-formed ideas about projects he might one day try. And sometimes he just wrote about how confusing life felt. What mattered wasn't brilliance. It was honesty. The notebook wasn't a performance. It was a mirror. So he wrote the messy things too. Doubts, fears, frustrations. And strangely, the more honest he became on the page, the clearer his thoughts started becoming off the page. He also began asking himself questions while writing, simple ones that forced his mind to slow down. What am I really worried about today? What do I actually want from the next 5 years? What small step could I take tomorrow? Something fascinating happened when he answered those questions in writing. The vague fog inside his head started breaking apart. Problems that once felt enormous became specific and manageable. Dreams that once sounded unrealistic suddenly looked like plans waiting for steps. The page had a way of demanding clarity. Soon, the ritual itself became part of his daily rhythm. Morning light through the window, a quiet room, pen in hand. Some days the words flowed quickly. Other days they crawled across the page, but the habit remained steady. And if you've ever tried something like this, you know the secret isn't intensity, it's repetition. 5 minutes today, 10 tomorrow, maybe 20 the next week. Write about what you learned that day. Write about a mistake and what it taught you. Write about an idea you're curious to explore. Because when thoughts meet paper regularly, they stop being noise. They start becoming direction. And yet, even with this new ritual, the journey wasn't suddenly easy. Now here's the part most people don't talk about. Starting a new habit feels exciting for about 2 days, maybe 3 if you're lucky. After that, the shine wears off, and the real test quietly begins. And for him, those first difficult days arrived sooner than expected. One evening, he opened the notebook and just stared at the blank page. The ideas that once rushed through his mind suddenly seemed to vanish. The pen hovered above the paper, unmoving. A familiar voice whispered in the background of his thoughts. What's the point of this? The words that came out felt awkward, clumsy, almost pointless. A few scattered sentences about his day. Random thoughts that didn't seem particularly meaningful. Nothing that looked like a breakthrough or a brilliant idea. And for a moment, doubt crept in. He wondered if writing was just another short-lived experiment. Another small habit he'd abandon after a few weeks. You know how that goes. People start journals, then forget them in a drawer. Life gets busy, motivation fades, and the notebook gathers dust. He had seen that story play out before, but something inside him pushed back against that doubt. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet reminder. The goal wasn't to write something impressive. The goal was simply to continue showing up. 1 page, 1 thought, 1 honest sentence at a time. So on those difficult days, he made the process even simpler. If he couldn't write pages, he wrote a paragraph. If he couldn't write a paragraph, he wrote a few lines. And sometimes he simply answered one question on the page. What's on my mind right now? It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the habit alive. And that's the secret most people overlook. Transformation rarely begins with dramatic change. It begins with small actions repeated quietly in the background of life. Actions that feel almost too simple to matter. What he didn't realize yet was that those small, imperfect pages were slowly rewiring the way he thought. And soon, something subtle but powerful would begin to emerge. Weeks passed, then a few months quietly slipped by. Nothing dramatic happened at first, no sudden success, no life-changing moment. But if someone had looked closely, they might have noticed something subtle. The man who once carried chaos in his mind was beginning to walk with a different kind of calm. Not loud confidence, just quiet clarity. His notebook slowly filled with pages. Some were messy, others thoughtful, many somewhere in between. But together, they told a story, his story. Thoughts that once spun endlessly in his head were now sitting still on paper. And once they were visible, they became easier to understand. He started noticing patterns in his thinking. Certain worries showed up again and again. Certain dreams refused to disappear no matter how often he ignored them. Writing gave him the rare ability to step back and observe himself, almost like watching his own life from the outside. Little by little, the fog inside his mind began lifting. Decisions became easier to make. Problems that once felt overwhelming turned into questions he could break apart. Instead of feeling lost in his thoughts, he was learning how to guide them. And that small shift changed the way he moved through each day. Even conversations began to feel different, because now, his ideas had already been explored on paper. He understood what he believed, what he questioned, what he wanted to say. So when the moment to speak arrived, the words didn't feel trapped anymore. They felt prepared. Something else changed, too. His relationship with mistakes. Whenever a day went badly, he didn't bury the frustration. He wrote about it. And once the experience was on the page, it often revealed a lesson he hadn't noticed before. This is something you could try yourself tonight. Take 5 minutes and write down one thing that challenged you today. Then ask one simple question. What did that moment teach me? You might be surprised how quickly the mind starts finding answers when it has space to think clearly. The quiet man was discovering something powerful. Writing wasn't just helping him release thoughts. It was teaching him how to understand them. And one day, that understanding would lead to something he never expected. For a long time, the changes remained mostly invisible. His thoughts felt clearer, his mind calmer. But from the outside, life looked the same. The same job, the same routines, the same quiet personality people had always known. But beneath the surface, something important was taking shape. And eventually, that inner shift began to reveal itself. One evening, while flipping through older pages of his notebook, he noticed something strange. An idea kept appearing again and again. Not always written the same way, not always on the same day. But the theme was there. Quiet, persistent, impossible to ignore. It was something he clearly cared about more than he realized. Before writing regularly, he would have dismissed that idea as just another passing thought. But now he could see the pattern. Page after page, week after week, the same curiosity had resurfaced. And suddenly, it felt less like a random thought and more like a direction. So he did something he had rarely done before. Instead of letting the idea stay inside the notebook, he explored it further. He broke it down into questions on the page. What would this actually look like in real life? What is the smallest step I could try? The answers weren't perfect, but they were enough to start moving. A small experiment, a conversation with someone who knew more about the topic. A few hours researching something he once thought was unrealistic, and step by step the idea began turning into action. Then something unexpected happened. During a conversation one afternoon, he shared the idea openly, not hesitantly like before, but clearly. Because he had already explored it through writing, the words were no longer trapped in uncertainty, and the response surprised him. Instead of indifference, people leaned in with interest. Questions followed. Suggestions appeared. What once lived only inside his notebook was now entering the real world. That moment may have seemed small to anyone watching, but for him, it was undeniable proof. The habit of writing hadn't just organized his thoughts. It had given them the power to become visible. And once that happened, the quiet man's future began unfolding in ways he never imagined. Time has a quiet way of revealing what small habits are really capable of. At first, writing had simply helped him breathe mentally. Then, it helped him understand his thoughts. But as the months continued passing, something deeper began unfolding. The quiet man was slowly becoming someone new. Not overnight. Real change rarely works that way. But the difference showed up in subtle moments. When someone asked for his opinion, he didn't freeze anymore. He had already explored his ideas through writing, so speaking them aloud felt natural. People around him began noticing something too. His words carried more clarity, more direction. He wasn't louder than before, but he was more certain. The same quiet man now spoke with thoughtful confidence, and that quiet confidence earned attention. His notebook kept growing thicker. Inside those pages lived reflections, plans, lessons, and questions. It had quietly become a map of his inner world. Whenever life felt confusing again, he returned to those pages, and clarity waited there. Some ideas written months earlier started turning into real steps. Projects he once only imagined were now being explored. Conversations that once terrified him now felt manageable, because the thinking had already been done on paper. Action simply followed the direction he had discovered. Writing had done something unexpected. It hadn't changed who he was. It revealed who he already was. The thoughtful mind he once kept hidden now had structure. The ideas that once felt chaotic now had pathways, and the silent storm inside him had become a compass. Even difficult moments became valuable. Whenever he faced setbacks or confusion, he returned to the page. He wrote about what went wrong. He asked questions about what could be learned, and often the answers quietly appeared. Years later, if someone asked him what changed his life, they might expect a dramatic event or a powerful mentor. But the truth was simpler than anyone expected. His future began shifting the moment he started writing his thoughts down, one honest page at a time. And yet the most important part of the story wasn't about him. If you step back and look at his story, something interesting becomes clear. The biggest change in his life didn't begin with opportunity. It didn't start with luck, connections, or some dramatic turning point. It started with something far quieter: a pen, a blank page, and the courage to face his own thoughts. Most people underestimate the power of putting words on paper. They think writing is only for authors, students, or people with something impressive to say. But the truth is far simpler than that. Writing is one of the most powerful ways to understand yourself, and understanding yourself changes everything. When thoughts stay inside the mind, they often remain tangled. Ideas blur together, fears grow larger than they should. But once a thought appears on paper, something magical happens. You can examine it, question it, improve it, and suddenly it no longer controls you. You don't need to write perfectly for this to work. You don't need fancy notebooks or complicated systems. You can start with 5 minutes tonight. Write one honest page about your day. Or answer one simple question: what's really on my mind today? Some days your writing might feel messy. Other days it might reveal ideas you didn't even realize you had. But over time, those pages begin forming a conversation with yourself, a place where your mind becomes clearer and your direction sharper, a place where quiet thoughts finally find their voice. And here's the surprising part. Many breakthroughs in life don't appear suddenly. They emerge slowly from reflection, from moments where you pause long enough to see your own thinking clearly. Writing creates those moments. The silent man in this story didn't suddenly become a different person. He simply gave his thoughts somewhere to grow. And once those thoughts had space to breathe, they began shaping decisions, actions, and eventually his future. All from something as simple as daily words. So now the question quietly shifts toward you. How many ideas are currently living only inside your mind? How many dreams are waiting for clarity? And what might happen if you gave those thoughts a place to exist? Maybe the first page is all it takes.